by way of a little further background, COPIC is a medical liability insurer. That's all we do for the past 40 years. All we do is handle malpractice cases. We've handled slightly over 100,000 incidents in our time. We've had 10,600 lawsuits, and of those suits that went to trial, we win 90% of the time. I personally started as a baby lawyer. I'm almost 30 years in practice, but as the first 10 years, I was a defense lawyer and handled a couple of hundred claims and tried a few dozen cases. And so that's what I'm coming to you with that perspective. And what I'm here to talk to you about today is the Utah CANDOR Act. And the CANDOR Act is, you could call it legal neuromodulation maybe. It's a less invasive way to solve the problem of injured patients with claims, right? And so to start with, what is the existing problem? Because you in medicine have, unique to you really, the concept of confidential peer review. Right? There's a complication occurs, you can do a root cause analysis, you can discuss it fully, you can discuss ways to prevent it, all confidentially without anyone being able to use it in litigation, and that's your time-honored tradition. The defect in the legal system is the legal system operates exactly the opposite, right? You've all heard 10,000 times in some cop show, anything you say can and will be used against you. That's largely absolutely true, right? And it prevents, when a complication occurs, free discussion with the patient. There is no peer review system for patient conversations, right? And that's what CANDOR is, and I'll explain more. The other problem in the medical arena in claims is if a patient makes a claim and you pay them money, you have to report that. You have to report that to the National Practitioner Data Bank, and then you have to report it to your state medical board. Well, that's on your record then, right? And it has an effect on you, particularly where, you know, everyone Googles and does searches on their physicians. Somebody's gonna find that, right? So those are impediments to discussion and early resolution, and what they result in are anger, distrust, and litigation. And we see it time and time and time again, that, you know, every time a case is filed, right? The depositions occur of all the parties, and that's just testimony under oath. And the plaintiff, the injured patient, is always asked, why did you go to a lawyer and why did you file this case? And somewhere in responding to that, they will all say, all I wanted was an answer, right? They wouldn't talk to me. They didn't return my calls. I didn't get an explanation. He dodged me. Some version of that, almost always you hear from an injured patient, right? And so, about 20 years ago, our industry and then your industry and even the federal government, AHRQ, began to discover that that's not always a BS answer. That yes, there may be some mercenary component to some lawsuits and to some attorneys, but that's a true statement. That a lot of people would never have filed a suit if they had just been able to freely discuss it and get an explanation, or even an apology. And that is what CANDOR does, right? And so what is CANDOR? CANDOR is an acronym, Communication and Optimal Resolution. You can think of it as the creation of a peer review system for you talking to your patient, right? Because it's a system for confidential and protected discussions that can't be used against you in a lawsuit. It allows for confidential payments that aren't reported, and it allows for a release so that there's no litigation. So how does it work, and why didn't it exist before? So Utah's the sixth state to do the implement of CANDOR, and actually probably has the best of the statutes. But you have to, the structure of it is to avoid, the first prong of it is to avoid the problem with the data bank and reporting to the Board of Medical Examiners. So it cannot be used in a case where a patient has made a claim, right? If they've made a demand on you, it's too late. If they filed a suit, it can't be used. There can't be a claim on the table. Nor, because you have a unique system here in Utah with med mal cases where you have to first go before a review panel before you can file suit. If that has happened, if that's been requested, you can't do CANDOR. It has to be initiated by the healthcare provider, which could be a physician or a hospital, any kind of healthcare provider. And there's a very strict way you have to do it in terms of providing notice and all of this, and that's where we come in. The carriers come in and typically handle that part of it. If the patient agrees, then you could do the full peer review discussion, type discussion, the full investigation, including apologizing, including the patient in efforts to prevent a recurrence of it. How are we going to learn from your injury and learn from this, and prevent it? And then also you have that the compensation has to be offered and by the healthcare provider. Again, there can't be a demand by the patient. So it's very nuanced, right? But it works. And so what do we know now that we've done it in all these other states? We haven't done that many in Utah, and that's why I'm here, to make you aware of it, right? Because for it to work, you have to know it exists. For it to work, you have to, when something happens, at the inkling of trouble or a complication that you think this is somewhere where this could be a problem, you need to call it in so that it can be addressed before it becomes a claim. And all a claim means is a demand for money, right? Before that, before it turns into a suit. So what has our experience been with it? So we have done, of the 6 states that have it, we're in 5 of them, and we have done it slightly under 500 times now. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but for us it is, and it's certainly enough for us to get some data on it and analyze it. And what we find is that the payments in candor cases are less than half of the indemnity payments we make in settling lawsuits, less than half. We also find that because you're not going into full-blown litigation, because you're catching it early, our legal costs for our defense counsel are 5% of what they are in litigation. The average life cycle of a candor claim, slightly over a year. Average life cycle of a lawsuit is 3 years. I've had a lawsuit that lasted 9. Trial, appeal, retrial. And the prime years of this surgeon's career were spent in the stress of a lawsuit. And perhaps the key thing we're finding about candor is this is not just some program where we're handing out cash, right? The vast majority of candor claims do not result in a payment. Over 75% are we get rid of with no payment, right? Of that 75+% of patients, less than 1% turn around and sue. And when we talk to them, the reason they don't is because they were treated with compassion, they were treated with honesty, they were speedily reacted to, and they got to be a part of the solution. How are we going to prevent what happened to me? And in a significant number of the cases, the physician-patient relationship was maintained, right? And so not only do you have the patient not going through the hell of a lawsuit, as Jeff said, these are people oftentimes who don't have any savings, right? And so they don't have to go through, the physicians don't have to go through the stress of it, because we are told time and again by our insureds that a lawsuit is the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to them in their life. More than a divorce, more than custody fights, more than death of family members. The trauma of a lawsuit is significant, and this avoids that. And so I just want you all to be real aware of it, that it is an option if trouble pops up, and our company has some other similar programs too, to get rid of things early and efficiently. If you want more info, I have this. Somewhere you'll have access to this, and you can get a great deal more detail on how candor works. And obviously you can also always call me. Somewhere my contact info is on there. We field these types of calls routinely. So I again thank you for having me, and this is really some impressive event, and so I'm really honored to have been here. Thank you.